Hey, everybody. Today for you podcast number 68. This week's podcast is titled, Your Apology is Not Appropriate. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. I'm Dr. Pete Lombardi, and this is my wife, Sandy, sitting right next to me, staying nice and warm here on a December evening. And this is the Limitless Life Network podcast where we flesh out all the limitations that are preventing you from reaching your goals and living the life that you're called to lead. And I want to take a moment now to thank all our listeners out there. Thank you for all those people that told me this week that you really got something out of last week's podcast. I know I got a message from somebody that said that they really like the direction the podcast has started to head. I'm like, wow, that's good feedback. I like that. Okay. I do too. I really like the direction that the podcast is going. This is a work in progress, right? And I just, I want to say that we are so grateful for all those that are listening. And, we look forward to putting these together each week. And sometimes I'm a little late getting to the table to sit down and discuss this, but nonetheless, we're committed to doing it. And we appreciate you as subscribers, like, follow, share, all that happy stuff. And let's get on with the show. All right, Sandy, your apology is not appropriate. What do you think of that title?
I'm wondering where you're going with it.
You're wondering where I'm going with it?
I know where you're going with it.
Oh, good. Okay. So it's the week before Christmas, and all through the podcasting studio, the week before Christmas, I know a lot of people are trying to get in that last minute shopping for that perfect gift, and people are doing their last minute preparations for the perfect Christmas party or being the perfect host or hostess. Everybody's trying to just do their best and get to the holidays. Some people are just trying to get through the holidays. Whatever the case may be, I think today's podcast will help you in this whole process of celebration that we're going through. So point number one is what?
Receive your gifts fully.
What in the world does that mean? How in the world do we receive our Christmas gifts? Is it Christmas gifts?
No.
No, it's not. Oh, how do we receive our gifts fully? What are we getting at there?
So this was from our sermon at church. Pastor John was talking about the gifts that we have, the talents that you have, or if you are blessed by something, you've been given a new job, an opportunity to travel. Do you acknowledge that it was a gift and you're grateful for it? And he even said some people are almost ashamed that they are given things or feel like they're not justified, like they had to earn it.
Right.
And that's not what we're called to do. Can we be thankful and grateful, to have these things?
Yeah. Can you accept your gifts with gratitude, with humility, being humble, without shame, without guilt, and without remorse too? Because sometimes we're gifted with things that are not things that we want, or they may not seem desirable. Like, say you're blind, I know a woman who's a wonderful woman. She listens to the podcast. She can't see, but I think she looks at it as her part of her superpower. And it doesn't really limit her at all. She lives a wonderful life and she's a blessing to so many people. And I think she's really leveraged her gift for God's glory, for sure. So, don't apologize for it. And that's really what an apology is not appropriate. In other words, don't try to hide the fact that God's blessing you, right? Like if you have a beautiful home that you live in, it's not of your doing that you have that beautiful home, by the way. You may think it's of your doing, but the reality is God allows a lot of things in your life, good and bad, but you've got to give him the glory for that, So your ability to work, your ability to think, your ability to produce, it comes from God. So embrace God's favor and be humble. Okay, point number 2 is what?
Remove all doubt and self-destruction.
Okay, you've got this is all Sandy on this one. She's reading this really good book here.
Yeah, I just started this book, and it's kind of special, and it will be many of our listeners knew Kelly Miller, friend of mine, and she was reading this book before she passed away, and I had just seen in a text thread. I'm like, oh, I should get that. So I got it from the library, and I'm reading it, and it's extra special because I knew she had been reading it, and it would be impactful. So, and it is. It's a story that starts out about a young mute boy back in Roman times, and had all these dreams and aspirations of what he was to become as a young child. Mute, didn't think that that was a disability really. But throughout his life, teen years, young adult, he began to believe all of the lies that people told him, that he was never going to be anything. He couldn't get hired. People wouldn't hire him for a job. And so this author speaks to that self-destruction because he just kept telling himself the lies that other people were speaking into him. And then he lost his purpose and passion for his life.
So true. Yeah. So
I guess the question for listeners and ourselves is, what lies are we allowing, to infiltrate our mind? And, the point of the book is like, it's here in our mind and in our heart. And if, we can control, in a sense, we can change the direction of our lives with our mind.
yeah, for sure. And so, sometimes these lies are inserted by others, and sometimes we self-assert them as well. Sometimes we will, get a partial story and we'll extrapolate a lie out of it just because we start to go down a negative spin on something. We may just read something in a text and just take it the wrong way. And next thing you know, we've escalated it in our mind to be something that's not even true.
Right.
And that's very easy to do. I've done it myself. Just you're in the wrong attitude. You get it the wrong way. It's not typed the right way or whatever. And there's a loss of a message in context, and now it becomes a lie that we believe. Your brain doesn't know the difference sometimes between the truth and a lie.
Yeah.
It brings us to point number 3.
Have you given up on your calling or purpose?
Yeah, and this is from that same book, and Sandy was telling me the story about an olive tree. You want to share that story of the olive tree?
Well, he said, an olive tree can go years barren and not producing fruit. And the olive tree doesn't say to itself, I'm such a failure, every spring it's a new spring, a new season, and another time of growth. And the olive tree just just instinctively soaks in the sun and draws water out of the earth through its roots. And so it's taking life, it's asking for life, and it's doing what it was designed to do, and it doesn't question that. And so the author is teaching this to the mute boy, that you've stopped drawing from your roots. You've stopped taking in the sun's rays. It was just a really good analogy.
Yeah, well, we do the same thing, don't we? Like we may think we're called to do something, and we're really inspired in the beginning, but then after time, we sometimes just put this time limit on things, and we're like, oh, it just didn't work.
Right.
It just didn't work out. And we give up. And we start to just stop doing the things that we know that if we could just stay the course, and other people have. Excuse me.
Yeah. Well, and receiving input, right, from others. And
yeah. So I'm going to lose my voice in the middle of this podcast. So you're going to have to take over.
Okay. Well, point number 4. Can you say yes when it matters? Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I don't know. So the bottom line is that life isn't easy, right? And it's funny, Pastor lost his voice when he was giving the same message. But there are challenges that are coming, and we need to say yes to those. So life is not always going to be easy. It's not always going to show up in the package that you think it's going to be. It's not always going to be something that you're like, oh, I planned this all out. And some of the things that we need to say yes to are things that are absolutely difficult. They're absolutely a huge challenge that nobody would want to even take on. Can you say yes to those things? Can you say, okay, looks like I got to deal with this, and I'm going to just go on and I'm going to put my best foot forward, but I'm going to trust in God and let him guide my steps. And this is really the story of Mary, right? She was asked, she was called to do something that was unthinkable in that time. And she said yes.
Right.
There was a lot of social pressure to not want to be in that situation. And the same thing for her husband. There's a lot of pressure for him to not be with her because, he wasn't the father.
Right.
So they both said yes. And with that, here's something that we all need to remember is that in those challenging times, if it is inspired by God, if it's a freshly spoken word of God, he is going to make a way for it to come true. Realize that. Like if it's truly a freshly spoken word from God, he will figure out the way for you. It always comes with an ability for it to be fulfilled. Okay, so we have to act out in faith in those times and just keep moving the ball forward.
We're going there with point number 5 because I'm thinking ahead, but in the example, so point number 5 is God qualifies the called. He doesn't call the qualified. And that was part of the example of Mary. She wasn't qualified to be the mother of the Savior of the world, was she? She's the young 14-ish young girl. We don't know much about her. Was she super intelligent? Did she have all these skills that were going to be useful? We don't really know, right? But the biggest thing is she had faith and she said yes. Like she,
Yeah.
So God will qualify you if he's calling you.
Yeah, when you're called, you will be qualified. So if you think about, you being qualified, like if you think you're qualified, if you think you're qualified for something, guess what? You do not have any idea how big of an assignment you actually are ready to do. Like you have no idea how large the assignment actually is for you if you think you're qualified, because if you think you're qualified, God's got something way bigger for you than that, right? So you may think it's going to be X, but it's going to be 10X, right? So just think about, I just think about this podcast. Like I never in my wildest dreams would have thought that we would together. I know you didn't either. It's the last thing. It's the last thing she wanted to do was to sit down and do a podcast and talk to a camera that's going to be viewed by other people. My wife is actually very self-conscious of how she looks and what she sounds like, and I am too. I know I don't have like perfect radio voice, but the point is that I feel like I'm called, and so does she now, to share a word, a message, a positive message of encouragement. And I'm not going to ignore that. I'm not going to sweep that under the rug because I know that I've been called to do this. I don't know where it's going to take me, but I'm going to trust, and it's going to take us. We're going to trust and move forward, and we're just going to keep doing this and keep showing up every week. And so what are you called to do? What has God spoken into your life that you may have pretended like it wasn't for you, or maybe you've swept it under the rug and did I hear that right? I don't know if I heard that right. Is that really for me? Right. I don't know. Like, yeah, it is for you. Okay. If you heard it, if God said something to you like that, we need to pay attention. We need to tune into the tuner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for any of you, like as we're coming up on the new year, and maybe some of you set goals and sit down, and a friend of mine, Patty McGee, another podcaster, in her last podcast this week was talking about setting the goals and writing them down. So, think about those things. If you are, write it down, take action, hold yourself accountable. And,
Yeah. I mean, that's, it's not, anybody could do this. Anybody could be a podcaster, but you have to believe that you could be a podcaster. Anything. It doesn't have to be a podcaster. If you believe that you could be a barber, you could be a barber, right? What you plant up here is fertile ground, okay? And if it's inspired by God, it will grow. Okay. That's all we have for this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. Tune in each and every week so you can stay connected, be inspired, and keep moving toward your goals by stripping away all your limitations. And we'll see you back next week. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah, have a wonderful Christmas.